Oh my God, it's another season of You're All Doomed, the podcast where we slice and dice our way through Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, 13 minutes at a time. I am your host, Brian.
I'm cardigan-wearing drunkard Greg.
This chunk begins with, surprise, a Paramount logo, and ends with a naked couple scromping in a bed.
Yeah, but the Paramount logo is new. It's a little bit different from the previous 6 that we've seen. It's
a lot more colorful. Looks like they've added a sunset or a sunrise in the background.
Yeah, this version of the studio logo was introduced in 1987. The mountain is now actually CGI, and the stars have been animated to include a motion. They swoop into frame. It was apparently done in collaboration with Apogee Incorporated, the visual effects firm that John Dykstra created after he left Industrial Light and Magic when they made Star Wars. Right off the bat, even before the first image we get of the movie, something feels different about the music. There is definitely a very different sound to this movie.
I noticed that too. It's very kind of synthy. It's almost like an accompaniment to what we've heard in the past, but it's definitely out of character from the other ones, and it even feels kind of more out of place than the theme song from Part 3 did, where at least that one was kind of the era and it was somewhat disco-y, but this one, just atmospherically, it just doesn't seem to fit the movie.
We're presented with a title card proclaiming that this is a Friday 4 Incorporated production. It's a little bit of a departure from Terror Incorporated or Jason Incorporated. So a new group is behind this one.
Do you know what the 4 would be?
I really don't. I wonder if it's a group of like 4 investors, or if it's the 4th one that they've teamed up to finance. Or
that could be.
You know, Frank Mancuso Jr. is still behind it in some regard, but enough may have changed where they felt the need to reincorporate under a new banner.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a play on the Fab 4, but it's like you said, it's 4 producers that are going to be producing Friday the 13th movie. So they're like, what about the Friday 4? We open up on a graveyard. It's dark and storming. It's a scene we've seen a million times before, but we're going to see it again. We see Jason walking through the woods, and then it just kind of becomes this montage where we see shots of him grabbing young Tommy from the final chapter, impaling Jeff and Sandra from Part 2, getting pushed down the stairs from Part 2. We get a nice quick cameo of Jason's subungual hematoma as he's cornering Vicky in Part 2. And this kind of just goes back and forth, and it's just kind of a rehash of everything that we've seen so far.
I noticed that they actually spend a lot of time on shots from the even-numbered movies of the franchise, which makes me wonder if there's sort of like the Star Trek curse where the odd-numbered ones are quietly forgotten and the even-numbered ones are considered the better of the series.
I couldn't figure out why they chose the shots that they did. It's very arbitrary, but it's all kind of over the board, but that's definitely one possible theory.
There's also an interesting insert of a tombstone being hit by lightning and exploding. This was not actually in any of the movies. It was from the trailer for Jason Lives Part 6.
What's weird about that lightning strike is before the headstone is struck by lightning, you can clearly see that the dirt around the grave has been untouched, but after the sparks and fire clear from the lightning strike, all of a sudden the grave has been dug up, and we cut to the scene from Jason Lives where Jason gets struck by lightning in the coffin. So there's just a lot of things going on.
Boy, they're all over the map on this thing.
And then there's basically just a couple more shots of people being killed, and then Tommy sinking Jason to the bottom of the lake. But while all this is going on, there is a narration, and it goes a little something like this. There's a legend around here, a killer buried, but not dead, a curse on Crystal Lake, a death curse, a Jason Voorhees curse. They say he died as a boy, but he keeps coming back. You have seen him and lived. Some have even tried to stop him. No one can. People forget he's down there, waiting.
Was it read by George W. Bush?
Actually, it's done by none other than Walt Gorney, who played Crazy
Hooray!
Ralph. I didn't find that out until after I had watched the movie, and I had to go back and play it again because it didn't sound like Crazy Ralph. So it sounds like Walt Gorney was actually, he was either playing a character of Crazy Ralph, which is not his usual voice, or he's playing a character as this narrator. But either way, the two voices really don't sound alike at all.
The recap ends 3 minutes and 18 seconds into the movie with the line, "People forget he's down there waiting." And of course, that's where we left Jason at the end of the previous movie. We then cut to the film's title card, which is festooned with a backlit hockey mask that is then split apart by some really amateurish, cartoony animation to reveal the title beneath it.
It's like beams of light shining through all the holes in the mask, and it's really cheesy.
I didn't love it. The movie title is yet again in the official font and styling that matches the poster and stuff. So that was nice to see. I always kind of like that consistency. We then launch into the main title credits, starting off with the actors who we'll cover in due course. But I did find it interesting that they credit Kane Hodder as Jason right up front. That's unusual for this series, and we'll come to discuss him as the season progresses. Casting for this movie was handled by Anthony Barneo, who's done a lot of horror, including From Beyond and Reanimator, which you and I will be watching later this weekend, and then a bunch of episodes of The Profiler on television. The music that we mentioned earlier is kind of an interesting semi-collaboration. Harry Manfredini is credited, but it sounds, from what I can tell, like it was basically reusing tracks from earlier scores in this series. He did not compose any new material for this movie. Instead, it's been supplemented by work by Fred Mullen, who did a lot of work for television, as well as we'll discuss the soundtrack for Part 8 next season. He apparently contributed to the soundtrack of the movie Mean Girls in some capacity, but I couldn't confirm exactly how, whether it was a musical score or a song in the background or something like that. But yeah, it's an interesting blend of the two different score styles, and I'm not entirely sure it's successful.
No, they're not working together, at least very early on in this movie.
Director of photography this time out is Paul Elliott. He worked on 976 Evil and the Macaulay Culkin classic My Girl, along with a lot of second unit and TV work. The New Blood was written by Daryl Haney, author of Extro 3, and someone named Manuel Fidello, which appears to be a pseudonym, in fact. Daryl Haney does not have a lot of fond memories of working on this project or the final result, and he credits a lot of the failure to this pseudonymous collaborator that did some revisions to his initial draft. The producer, Ian Patterson, went on to produce several episodes of Stranger Things and House of Cards, so he's got a pretty nice gig at Netflix, it seems. And The New Blood is directed by John Carl Buechler. He came up working on special makeup effects in the industry. As we mentioned last season, he directed the movie Troll 1, which is nowhere near as entertaining as the infamous Troll 2, but was a little bit more of a straightforward, monster movie. After this, he did some special effects for the movie Hatchet, which features Kane Hodder and is sort of a throwback to the slasher era movies of the 80s. Sadly, Buechler died of prostate cancer in March of last year at the age of only 66. So he'll be missed.
Once the credits are done, we open up on a night shot of Lake Forest Green. We see a couple of houses that are right on the shore of the lake, and there's a pretty fancy covered boat dock. And the camera briefly ducks underwater, and we see that Jason is still tethered to the bottom of the lake with the chain and the boulder.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, some time has obviously passed if these really nice-looking houses have been built in this fancy new boat dock.
Right, because none of that was there the last time we saw them.
No, it was kind of like Camp Forest Green seemed a little bit run down. We don't get a sense of exactly where Jason is in relation to these buildings or the dock. So, I mean, it's unclear exactly where he is in the lake at this point, but...
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because they cut from the shot of the house to the lake, you're kind of left to presume that this is taking place right off the shore of where Jason is tethered, but that's not necessarily the case. He could be anywhere in that lake. So that is a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I wondered if we were seeing an expanse of the shore that we had not even seen in previous movies.
Like the other angle, like
Right,
facing
exactly.
the other side of the lake.
And until we get some sense of where Jason is planted, it's a little bit open to speculation at this point.
Back on the shore of the lake, we see a young blonde girl named Tina Shepard, and she's standing on the front porch of one of those houses. She is basically Carol Ann from Poltergeist.
I wondered if it was her stunt double.
Yeah, it looks exactly like her. It sounds like her parents are inside the house fighting, so she doesn't want to go in. Conveniently and inexplicably, there's a daily calendar nailed to the side of the front door that tells us it's Friday, October 13th.
Why would you have a calendar on the outside of the house?
I have no idea. So you knew what day it was when you were walking in? I have no idea. It's
I
just
thought that was odd.
Yeah, it's just letting us know what the date is because for some reason we're still supposed to care about the date, Friday the 13th.
From the other side of the door, we hear a woman's voice say, "Please don't drink anymore," which made me laugh. It's obviously meant to establish that Tina's father has a drinking problem, but the phrasing is sort of childish, and I wondered if it meant like don't drink anymore from the bottle you're currently holding, or don't drink anymore ever. It was sort of a strange.
It is strange. It's almost like please don't take another sip of your alcoholic beverage that turns you into a monster whenever you drink it.
Yeah, and Dad yells, "Don't tell me what to do," and then we hear a slapping sound effect. So Dad is apparently abusive.
Tina is hurt enough, so she runs outside to the dock and jumps into a boat. The man runs out to the dock to stop her, and this is John Shepard, Tina's father. Tina said that she doesn't want to come in because he hit Mom again. So this is establishing that this has happened many times before, and Tina's kind of fed up.
Yeah, it was interesting to me that he runs down to the dock. He's wearing his little cardigan sweater, but he doesn't seem the least bit drunk.
No, not at all.
He's he's totally coordinated, so he isn't losing his balance, and his speech is not even impaired. So, it's hard to tell. I wonder almost if that "please don't drink anymore" line was an ADR insert after the fact, when they realized that maybe making him an abusive guy without booze was a little bit too harsh, and they wanted to mitigate it somehow, even though that's not
it doesn't
a
make
mitigating
it any better,
factor.
right.
But it doesn't flow seamlessly, in my opinion.
After Tina's dad is unsuccessful in getting Tina to come in, Tina's mom, Amanda Shepard, comes running down to the lake. Tina yells at her dad, "Go away, I hate you, I wish you were dead." And then Tina gets this very intense look on her face, and the water starts to bubble around Tina's boat. So not exactly sure what's going on, but the bubbles make their way to the dock where Mr. Shepard is standing. And then this dock, it's pretty substantial. It's got a high, it's got some walls and a roof. It starts to shake and falls apart. And it sends Mr. Shepard into the surprisingly deep lake, considering it's just off the shore. I mean, he's just standing on the dock that's maybe like 15, feet long, but the water is like 30, 40 feet deep. It's like completely dark. But he falls into the water, and Tina is kind of freaked out by what happened, and she just screams out, "Daddy!"
It's a pretty cool stunt. We see Dad sink to the bottom motionless, but the whole structure just collapses around this actor / stunt person. We're obviously meant to infer that the frothing force that Tina brought from underneath her boat was strong enough to undermine the dock pilings, and they communicate this with a pretty great stunt setup. It's cool.
Following the scene of Mr. Shepard going to the bottom of the lake, we cut to a teenage blonde who's been awoken by a bad dream, and she's sitting in the passenger seat of a car. We've clearly jumped forward a number of years, and this is grown-up Tina Shepard. I was curious to see what kind of timeline we were dealing with here, so I did a little digging, and according to director John Carl Buechler, it's been 10 years since Tommy chained Jason to the bottom of the lake. So if you're following the movie's actual timeline, which you shouldn't even really bother with at this point, but Tina kills her dad on Friday, October 13th, 1991, and then this picks up in September of 2001. Hashtag never forget.
I think that there's got to be a little bit of a different gap. If Tommy drowns Jason in 1991, there had to be more time between Tommy drowning Jason and young Tina collapsing the dock. So then I would argue that it's probably like 3 years between those two events, and then like maybe 7 years between little Tina and the Tina we're now seeing as a grown woman. So I think the date, you've got the dates right, but I feel like the Tina collapsing the dock wasn't in 1991. That would have been more like 1994.
That would make more sense because
there had to be some passage of time.
Yeah, it's not like the events with Tommy happen and then the next night on the other side of the lake we see young Tina going through this. Like, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So yeah, there's probably most definitely a passage of time between the end of Jason Lives and when we see young Tina. But by the time we see grown-up Tina, it sounds like it's safe to assume that it's been 10 years since Jason has been at the bottom of the lake.
Right. Jason's been down there rotting away for a decade. Looks like Tina's in the car with her mother, who we met a little while ago.
With some really sweet 80s mom hair.
Yeah. We learned that Tina had been in a hospital, but is now in the care of someone named Dr. Cruz. I gather that they're on their way to meet up with him somewhere. They pass a sign that states they are 15 miles away from Crystal Lake. So no matter what, enough time has passed that Forest Green has now changed its name back to Crystal Lake. Maybe once everybody heard that Jason is dead for real this time, they felt comfortable changing the name back to its original
or the mayor of Forest Green was not familiar with what happened prior to that, and so after the events of Jason being chained to the bottom of the lake by Tommy, the mayor's like, oh, well, we can't be known as Forest Green anymore because everyone's going to know about what happened with Jason at the bottom of the lake, so let's just change it to, I don't know, Crystal Lake. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Yay! They pull into a wooded parking area to see Dr. Cruz, complete with popped collar on his sport coat, leaning against the railing of a porch. And we can tell that Tina's breath hitches as she looks around and sees the wreckage of the dock from several years earlier. So she's definitely back at the site of whatever trauma led her into hospitalization.
Directly next door to the Shepherd's house, 3 people are watching Tina and Mrs. Shepherd unpack their 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. One of them is Christopher Reeve. No, actually, it's Nick. He's washing his 1981 Jeep CJ7. And then there are 2 girls who are sunbathing in their bikinis, and this is Melissa and another Sandra. Melissa appears to be a little snotty as she checks out Tina and makes a comment about, there goes the neighborhood.
Yeah, she's wearing a rich girl hat, so they're clearly setting her up to be the hoity-toity bitch. Nick, the hunky Jeep washer, gallantly helps Tina when her suitcase pops open. Embarrassingly, there's a lot of underpants handling as they try to get stuff back in the luggage. And Tina kind of gives him a sarcastic, thanks for your help kind of brush off. So there's an interesting vibe between the two of them right away.
While all this is going on, Mrs. Shepherd and Dr. Cruz head into the house. And Dr. Cruz says with joy in his voice, so this is where it all started. And it's like, yes, Dr. Cruz, this is where Tina killed her father.
Yeah,
such warm memories.
Have a little decorum, Dr. Cruz.
He makes a comment about how they've tried everything they could at the hospital, but they just weren't making enough progress. So it sounds like this was kind of the plan B of bringing her back to her house where this, horrible accident happened to see if they can make any progress with her.
But he wastes no time jumping right in on Tina's course of treatment. He even sets up a video camera to record whatever session they're about to have. I definitely immediately get a vibe from Tina that she's not his biggest fan. They have a little bit of an antagonistic relationship.
I think at some point Tina refers to Dr. Cruz to her mother as Bad News Cruz.
I mean, and that's not unfair because he doesn't seem like much of a psychotherapist. He answers all of her questions with questions of his own and seems much more interested in trying to get her to display telekinetic powers by moving a matchbook. And he's really badgering her quite a bit. I have to believe that he assumes her power is triggered by emotion, so maybe shouting at her will help.
she mentioned that she doesn't know how to really control her powers and doesn't know how to make this matchstick move like he's requesting. And he gets pretty pissed and he's like, "You're lying to me, because when it happens, when your emotions are at their peak." And he tells her to like stop holding back and just to concentrate. So yeah, from the word go, he's just not being a very sympathetic caretaker of Tina,
to say the least. In fact, his approach works, because in a moment of frustration, she does manage to make the matchbook scoot across the desk. He explains that her psychokinetic ability is a projection of the suppressed guilt feelings that she has about her father's death. But that's dead wrong, because we saw her use her psychokinetic powers to cause her father's death, so there was no guilt yet because she hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
They continue to argue, and I guess, in her telekinetic fury, she accelerates the molecules of the matchbook to the point where they burst into flame.
At the house next door, there's now a van parked outside. It's a 1971 Dodge Tradesman. And inside the van, Sandra, who we saw before sunbathing, is having sex with a dude named Russell, who is not Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. She asks Russell that if this is his uncle's house, why are they sleeping in the van? So at least now we know that Russell's uncle owns this vacation/party house on the lake that's next door to the Shepherds. And, but she responds with something along the lines of, who says we're sleeping?
I mean, if your uncle owns the house and you're going to be there for the weekend, why would you invite so many people to cause overflow that you're the one that has to go sleep in the fucking van?
It's poor planning.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're just going to use it as a place to bone your girlfriend, it's just like, no, just plan ahead.
And that's where this episode wraps up.
For deaths, we have only one. Apparently, Tina's dad, Mr. Shepard, died in the collapse of the boat dock. I don't have anything else for this chunk, Brian.
I don't either, but I guess we'll just have to find out next week if Tina is able to get another book of matches. So until then, you're all doomed.